Question, Baroness Randerson.
Leave to ask questions standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, Ministers recognise that the current service provision is far below the standard that passengers rightly expect. The Government constantly reviews operators' performance, and all options regarding contracts remain on the table to ensure we reach a long-term solution that works for passengers in the north and across the rail network.
My Lords, recent Office of Road and Rail data exposes the scale of the misuse of P-coding, the last-minute cancellations, by TransPennine Express. In the month up to 4th of February, TPE cancelled almost a quarter of their services, and Avanti West Coast was not far behind on 17%. These train companies have exploited this loophole to the great inconvenience of passengers and have misled the public. Can the Minister assure us that they will not be rewarded with new contracts?
I'm not entirely sure that the picture is quite as the noble lady has set out. There's not necessarily a misuse of P codes. The issue is there has to be a point in the day beyond which a cancellation counts and has to be published as a same-day cancellation, and the period before when a cancellation can happen for all sorts of different reasons, including engineering works, reduction in timetable, asked for by the department to ensure reliability. So we are working very closely with the ORR in terms of the transparency of the cancellation data that is out there. There will, of course, still be P-code data, but there will be other data around the cancellation of train services. And when it comes to performance figures, of course, all of the data is taken into account.
Edinburgh Waverley at 9:30 this morning and got here in plenty of time for questions because I travelled on the publicly owned LNER. When is the government going to learn that lesson?
My Lords, I went to Liverpool the Friday before last. I got there on time. I returned on time. My Lords, there are journeys across the country and across the north that work on time and to a great level of passenger experience. But what is the case is where the services are not working properly, we do need to hold the operators to account and make them better.
My Lord, can I draw attention to my interests as Chairman for Transport for the North? There is no doubt that the rail passengers in the North have had a torrid time, be it on TPE, Avanti or Northern. What can the Government do to reassure the travelling passengers in those areas directly affected that the train companies have now got the right mechanisms in hand to ensure that future services will improve, whether that is industrial relations or other related matters? There is an issue around P-coding, but actually P-coding does give forward notification, and that should be counted in the overall cancellations.
There are many things that the Government is doing because, of course, not all train operating companies in the north are the same. They will have slightly different challenges and have actually been able to address those challenges more quickly than others in certain circumstances. But the challenges really fall into three areas. The first is absence and sickness, which is higher, my Lords, than really it should be, and that needs to be addressed. The second is rest day working and overtime. Noble Lords will all know about the national industrial action that happens periodically. There is also other industrial action around rest day working and more localised disputes. My Lords, those are having very significant impacts on services. And of course the last in some circumstances is driver departures. Some drivers are choosing to leave the industry. So as my noble friend points out, those are the sorts of things that we have to consider. We have got action plans for each of the train operating companies, but each one will have slightly different challenges to address.
My Lords, I think the noble lady, the Minister, has just described a railway that is in a mess. Is the Great British Railway going to sort this out? If the answer is yes, why have we not seen a bill to make it happen? Does the noble lady, the Minister, know when the bill is going to be introduced?
I think I have mentioned at the dispatch box many times that the bill for rail reform will be introduced when parliamentary time allows, but I think it is worth pointing out that an awful lot can be done before legislation is put in place. And actually one of those key things that can be carried out is workforce reform, because we have to be absolutely realistic about the challenge that our railways face. And without careful and reasonable reform, there will be no long-term future for the railway. And so therefore I would put it to the noble lord that if he has any influence whatsoever amongst the leaders of the trade unions, that he asks them to put forward the packages that the government has put forward to their membership. We need to understand whether or not we are going to be able to reform the workforce, and if we are not, the consequences will be quite severe.
Take this opportunity to kill stone dead the reports that are circulating that despite Avanti Westcoast's appalling performance, the government is still minded to renew their contract.
I cannot possibly respond to reports, but it is the case that all options remain on the table with regards all of the different contracts as they come up for renewal. And of course there are very well set out processes involving independent evaluation of performance, and all of those things will be gone through when it comes to considering Avanti West Coast's contract.
My Lords, I had the pleasure of travelling on the same train as Lord Folkes this morning, but I wasn't obviously in the same part of the train as him. I would just like to comment, though, on the remarks of Lady Randerson, that whilst those of us in the north are irritated by the services provided by some of the service providers, we are also waiting with bated breath for a decision by the government to once and for all sort out the links that are necessary between our northern cities, east to west. When are these going to happen?
Well, and this, I suppose, is part of the complex web here, in that the government wants to invest billions of pounds in rail infrastructure for the north. However, if we are unable to operate the services as the train operating companies would like to do, then that is going to become increasingly difficult. So it is really important that as we invest billions of pounds across the north, we do so with a constructive and a collaborative relationship with the unions, with the workforce, to provide the modern 7-day railway that we need.
My Lord, at least the service this morning from the northwest ran, although it was 20 minutes late in getting to Euston. But the noble Baroness was good enough to raise these issues during a meeting with Tim Merriman, Hugh Merriman, a few weeks ago, and she'll recall that one of the issues that was raised was a point that was just made to her by a noble friend about east-west travel. And one particular suggestion was that the Hellifield link should be reopened to create a second line of route across the Pennines. The noble Baroness kindly said that she and the Transport Minister would consider coming to see the situation firsthand. She's received requests from the local Member of Parliament for Ribble Valley and from the leader of Lancashire County Council, and I wonder when that might be expedited.
I'm grateful to the noble lord for reminding me of that. I will go and give the rail minister a bit of a kick and see if we can get him on his way.
Isn't it the case, my lord?
I think the minister would agree with me that one of the ways that the railways could be improved would be by stopping the strike action and getting things back to normal. And on that basis then, could the minister tell me whether or not, on strike days, whether the government still pays subsidies to Advantage trains for providing no service whatsoever, or whether they withhold the subsidy that they get on a daily basis for running the railways? And I don't expect the number right now, but to within 10 million would be helpful.
I'm not sure the subsidies to which the noble lord refers. Of course, there will be complex contractual arrangements around what Avanti is entitled to, and the government would make sure that we abide by those contracts. But he does raise the key here, and I don't think I've emphasised this potentially sufficiently previously, is that we need to ensure that we get the workers back to work. We need to ensure that we get the workforce reform that we need, because I am very concerned that rail workers are being led by their union leaders towards a point where there will be no long-term jobs for them and no railway system for passengers either. So it is not the case that when a railway worker strikes, they lose their pay just for that day. We are also weakening the system as a whole for the future.
Though, that the publicly run
rail service is far more effective than the ones that are run by Avanti and all the private sector. What lessons does she learn what does the Minister learn between the performance figures for those in public ownership to those in private?
There are all sorts of reasons and criteria as to why one train operating company runs better than another. Often it can be due to engineering works, if you're upgrading a main line, for example, all sorts of different things that can happen. But it is the case that the government does learn lessons from the train operating performance, comparing one against the other, and we take those lessons forward, and particularly for those TOCs in the north, we make sure that those lessons are put in their action plans.